This is COM 230, Lesson 7, using advanced tools in Adobe Illustrator. Start in Adobe Illustrator. There are a number of advanced tools that I can show you. We're going to work on 3 or 4 of them today. First one, I'm going to start off with a simple rectangle. I'm going to make a copy of that. So I have a couple of different options here. Alright, the first tool I want to show you is actually the erase tool. The erase tool can split different objects into multiple objects, and there's a few different ways that Adobe Illustrator can do this function. This is just one of the simplest. So with my eraser tool, I'm going to go to my first rectangle. I'm simply going to split this object into multiples. Oops, I'm sorry, you do have to have that selected before you do this. Select it with your regular selection tool. Okay, and what this does is it actually cuts up your single object into multiple objects. And you can move these objects around. They are now separate objects from the original entity. You can use them separately, or you can leave them combined kind of as pieces, depending on the look that you want to go for. Okay, you'll notice that this does retain the fill and the stroke that I assigned to this object. You can also go under the erase tool, and there is a tear off here. You also have the scissors tool and the carve or the knife tool. The scissors tool is similar. You actually click on the path, select your object, and then with your scissors tool you want to click on the path of your object. Okay, and you need to click twice in order to cut this object into pieces. Now what this has done is created 2 separate objects. The difference between the two, the one using the erase or the carve tool or the one using the scissors tool, is that using the scissors tool does not continue that edge. Okay, it is actually, this is now an open path. It's not a closed path, whereas this is a closed path. It has a path and it has anchor points connecting all those paths. Whereas on this object, there's no path here whatsoever. Okay, it's an open shape. Okay, so there's different looks depending on what it is that you're trying to achieve. There's different ways of using these. And the knife tool, also it used to be called the carve tool in an earlier version, but the knife tool works very similar to the eraser tool. And if you select your object, you can see how that will work the same. And those objects will become separate objects that you can work with. Okay, so that is the eraser, the scissors, and the knife tool. You have to select all those and delete and start with some more. For this particular tool, I want to start showing you guys some of the Pathfinder tools, which are in this tab. If you don't have Pathfinder open, please go to Window and go to Pathfinder and make sure that that is checked on. Now most of the time when we're working in designs, we don't necessarily want something as simple as a rectangle or a simple ellipse. We usually have to create a more complex or more sophisticated object. So for this one, I'm going to start with a rectangle, and I'm going to create a star. I'm going to increase the number of points on my star. I'm going to take my star and I'm going to overlap it and position that as I like it. I'm going to rotate that a little bit. I'm going to get a nice look to this. I'm going to go ahead and select both of these objects. I'm also going to align them. And yeah, it's pretty close anyway. Okay, I want to align those on a single axis. Okay, once I have my 2 objects created, they are overlapping each other, and this is where I can start playing with some of the Pathfinder tools. Pathfinder tools can help you take really simple objects like this and create something much more detailed and much more complex in just simply a few clicks. It's much simpler than some of the other methods that you could do to achieve this. So as you go through some of the shape modes and some of the Pathfinder modes, you want to click on these, see what happens to your two shapes. You might want to try to separate those shapes or edit those, and then you can always undo each one of those steps so that you can see all of these. First one is add to shape area. Oops, I'm sorry. You do need to have both of those selected. Select both your objects and click on that first one. So you see your first object that you create simply combines those two shapes together into one single shape, and that's the Unite tool. I'm going to undo that. I still have both objects selected, and I'm going to try the minus front. Okay, and again, it's another way of selecting and we're creating an object out of some very simple shapes. Okay, and that's using the second button. It's minus front. Okay, third one is intersect. And it simply shows the intersection of those two shapes. Undo again and exclude. Okay, so you have different ways of combining objects, and you can get a really nice looking, simple but nice looking object using some of these shape modes. Okay, on the bottom row you have divide, and this one's nice in that it creates separate objects. You have to ungroup those, but you now have 3 different objects that you can work with. Okay, I'm going to undo that. Okay, select both again. You have trim, which will combine the objects, but it does take off that outside edge. To undo that. Third one is merge. Has a similar look to it, but depending on the fill and the stroke color you have for each of these objects, these will look different. Let me just show you that really quick. Okay, some of these do have different looks, and they'll take different colors depending on which one is on top of each other. So you just kind of have to experiment with these a little bit. Okay, crop. Outline. Simply gives you the outline of these shapes, so you don't actually see them. You see that very, very faint yellow. Pretty difficult to see here. And minus back. So there's all different ways that you can use these Pathfinder tools, and some of them are called shape modes, others are called Pathfinders. But all of these buttons here can be used in different ways to create different shaped objects out of things. Alright, that's the end of this lesson.